It's a shame that 2010's The Wolfman doesn't receive the recognition it deserves. I actually think it's a damn good werewolf story. It's beautifully shot, well acted, and very well written. Andrew Kevin Walker, the screenwriter for David Fincher's Seven, co-wrote The Wolfman, and just like Seven's pro-life subtext, The Wolfman delves into another sensitive topic: parental emotional neglect.
Little wild feral boy, powerfully strong. Lycanthropy. Lycanthropy.
The first time we see Lawrence Talbot is on stage performing William Shakespeare's Hamlet. In one of the play's most famous scenes, while in a cemetery, Hamlet holds a jester's skull, which sends Hamlet into a monologue discussing the mortality of man.
Alas, poor Yorick. I knew him, Horatio. A fellow of infinite jest.
This Hamlet speech is important to Lawrence's character. It foreshadows his own tragic ending he'll suffer by the film's conclusion. The werewolf theme, in general, is a tragic tale of hopelessness. Once the werewolf curse is upon you, it's impossible to remove it. In this case, it's the results from childhood trauma that symbolizes that hopelessness. In the unrated director's cut, Lawrence converses with an old man on a train. The old man, played by the late, great Max von Sydow, discusses with Lawrence about memories of their mothers and a silver wolf's head cane he tries to offer him.
My oldest memory is of my mother. We are gathering grapes in her father's vineyard. That's beautiful. It will give me great pleasure to know that it was in the keeping of a civilized man. I purchased this one in Gévaudan lifetimes ago.
Some of the European werewolf lore comes from the famous incident of the Beast of Gévaudan. In the span of 3 years, from 1764 to 1767, a pack of wolves terrorized the mountain area of south-central France, attacking and killing hundreds of villagers. So, the cane, as a historical artifact, holds a symbolic presence to the upcoming werewolf story. If we take the presence of large, aggressive animals as symbolic to childhood trauma, then the Talbot mansion is overflowing with trauma. Just as Lawrence enters his father's property, a wolf statue, baring its teeth, greets him. Inside, a stuffed lion and tiger stand guard in the foyer, and when Lawrence found his dead mother, he passes by several large topiaries of aggressive animals. They growl and grunt, adding to the trauma he'll experience when he finds his dead mother.
Mother?
Just behind Sir John, atop the staircase, is a statue of a man fighting a lion. This is from the biblical story of Samson. In the book of Judges in the Old Testament, Samson, on his way to see a Philistine woman he's interested in marrying, is suddenly approached by a lion in a vineyard. He easily defeats the lion with his bare hands. Samson, it's assumed then, was physically stronger than the deadly beast.
Miss Conlove learned that I was in London.
Samson?
Samson.
Sir John even names his dog Samson as an ode to the biblical story. It's the first time we see Sir John in the film, who's wearing a coat with a tiger print collar, meaning he is similar to an aggressive predator.
Lo and behold, the prodigal son returns.
The prodigal son is a New Testament story about a man who squanders his father's inheritance on women and drink, which we have seen Lawrence involved with already, implying he lives a life of debauchery too. The man comes back to his father as a pathetic disgrace, but his father forgives him and accepts him again. The prodigal son is about forgiveness, but here the mention of the prodigal son is nothing more than an insult to Lawrence because he doesn't reflect any sin against Sir John. In fact, it's the opposite. Sir John has been manipulating Lawrence his whole life. Lawrence visits a local pub where he overhears a few villagers discussing Ben Talbot's murder and the nearby presence of nomadic gypsies. One of the patrons mentioned that Sir John's wife was a gypsy who killed herself. The man even refers to her as a whore. This grabs the attention of Lawrence, who overheard the whole conversation. He tries to fight the man, but is escorted away, saying that his mother was not a whore. But she was, indeed, a gypsy whore.
My mother wasn't a whore.
Come on, get him. You remember that black-eyed Salome the old man married? Went crazy up there in the war, killed herself. She was a gyppo whore queen or some such, wasn't she?
Sir John even alludes to this when he tells Lawrence about the gypsies later on.
They would move on once they'd sold the local lads all the wine and dark-haired ladies they could stand.
The dialogue here is very important. Sir John refers to the gypsy whores as dark-haired ladies. This is similar and on purpose to how the man in the tavern referred to Sir John's gypsy wife. Sir John, as wealthy as he is, had a taste for the gypsy ladies. Rather than marrying and having a family with a woman from another wealthy crest, the way most of the wealthy do to keep their finances safe and respect to their family name, Sir John chose to dabble in and marry a nomadic whore. And by Ben having dealings with the gypsies, he would have likely been smitten, eventually, by gypsy lust too. And that's likely how Sir John met his gypsy wife, was by having dealings with them. As Lawrence is wandering the estate, he enters his old room and recalls a memory of his mother. She looks exactly how the villager and Sir John had described. Black hair, dark eyes. This is also when we see why Lawrence was sent away to Lambeth Asylum in London. He and Ben are awoken to their mother's screams, and when Lawrence investigates, he sees that she's taken her own life with a straight razor to her throat. This memory has been manipulated, of course, from his time spent with the doctors at the asylum. The doctors in the horrible treatment there had convinced him that his mother killed herself when she was actually murdered by Sir John as a werewolf.
Little wild feral boy, powerfully strong.
Lawrence investigates his brother's death and eventually becomes a werewolf himself. He's once again sent to the same Lambeth Asylum he had visited for a year as a child. The most important scene in the film happens when Sir John comes to visit. He informs Lawrence of his affliction with lycanthropy.
I contracted the disease, if that's what it is, in India and the Hindu Kush.
This is how the werewolf curse began, from this little boy in the Kush mountains of India. But you have to wonder how a feral boy could turn people he bites into werewolves. Plot-wise, for the werewolf story to exist, I guess it makes sense. But there is more to this scene. Going with the parental neglect theme I had mentioned earlier, it all starts with this boy. Just like Lawrence, the feral boy was without a father and mother. Where were they? They're nowhere to be found. The kid is living in a cave by himself and probably hunting his own food like an animal. He's been abandoned by his parents and forced to survive on his own. Lawrence is also feral in the sense that he doesn't have parental guidance. His mother died when he was young, and Sir John had sent him away to America for many years. And when Sir John was around his kids, he psychologically tortured them.
It was our refuge.
From what?
You mean from whom?
Sir John even admits his narcissistic tendencies to Lawrence when he says that Gwen was going to take Ben away from him.
Yeah, she would have taken your brother away from me and they would have both vanished into the night forever.
Sir John would have been all alone in his huge mansion with nobody to manipulate and torture. So it was okay if he neglected his kids, but he wouldn't allow for his kids to leave him. Before Sir John exits the asylum, he gives Lawrence the same straight razor Lawrence thought his mother killed herself with.
I have a small gift for you, Lawrence, in the event you don't find life as glorious as I find it to be, or not to be.
The feral boy in the cave was living a hopeless life. No purpose, no guidance from his parents, and that hopeless and aimless lifestyle is transferred onto the Talbot family. In the asylum montage, the feral boy even takes the place of the young Lawrence, symbolizing their connections as two boys suffering from parental neglect. Although Lawrence was a successful actor, he didn't have any responsibilities like a wife or a child. He just drank and womanized, simply existing and surviving, and not responsible for anyone but himself. Even his profession as an actor is often disrespected by other characters. They suggest that, as an actor, Lawrence's identity is shiftable, and therefore, prone to irresponsibility and neglect.
It must be a wonderful luxury. doing battle with imaginary demons, Mr. Talbot.
So I've never understood what it is that you do, pretending to be other people.
But you've been seen as Hamlet, Macbeth, Richard III, all with that same face. I'm a prudent man, but ask who else might be living inside that head of yours.
I would suggest the action of an animal. Or a lunatic, perhaps.
When Lawrence returns to Talbot Hall to confront his father, he finds Sir John already anticipating his arrival, playing the piano. Father and son transform into werewolves and fight. Lawrence wins and howls as the portrait of his mother watches on. Her soul has been avenged by her son killing his father. Only part of the trauma is resolved, though. Lawrence's death by Gwen finishes and ends the legacy of parental neglect within the Talbot family. But Lawrence passes on his curse to Inspector Aberline, building him up to be the next Wolfman. However, that doesn't really work, does it? Childhood trauma from parental emotional neglect is the primary theme all throughout the story, so Aberline's curse doesn't properly fulfill a successful addition to the neglect theme. It's just there as a transparent plot point for a hopeful sequel.